Okay, here we go. In this video, we're going to be talking about comments and adding comments to your code. And we'll talk a little bit about string. Really, we're just introducing string as a data type and possible variable and then coding HelloYou. So when we first write a segment of code, we are completely familiar with all of its nuances. However, months later, that same code can often be a mystery. Can be mysterious and confusing to even us. Moreover, other programmers need to be able to read and understand our code. We talked about how readability really helps with that. If you make code that is neatly formatted and consistent, that helps with readability. But comments can also help with that. Almost every programming language includes these things. This like Java, C++, even HTML. You can include comments. They are sentences or sentence fragments that explain a section of code from within the source code itself. It's little notes that we can leave in the code so that other people know what's going on, including us. The Java compiler will ignore comments, which ultimately mean you can write whatever you want. Comments exist purely to support the comprehension of code. We're going to talk about two different types of comments in Java. We have a single line comment or a multi-line comment. Let's talk about the single line comment first. Simply put, we can do forward slash, and then whatever we want. An example of this, here I'm creating or declaring an integer x, and I leave a comment, declares a variable called x. Right here is proper Java syntax. We're declaring an integer variable called x. But over here, I do this forward slash, and everything after that on that line is considered a comment. All the text that appears after the forward slash in that line will be considered part of the comment and ignored by the compiler. The computer doesn't even pay attention to it. So what I suggest is let's go into some code and add comments. Moonweight is a perfect example of this. So I have pulled up Moonweight here in IntelliJ, and I'm going to go through and add some single line comments. Right here may be a good one. When we were going through this code, we created this variable g, and it makes sense. That's a gravitational constant. This is an actual constant in physics. Here I am days later looking at this code and what is g? G is not a very descriptive variable name, right? So I like the variable g. It makes sense in the context of physics. It made sense to us whenever we did this, but if I come back and look at the code, I'm like, oh, what is that? So this is a really good example of a comment. Right? Gravitational. Oh no, not this again. Alright, let me hop over. Use the Google to tell me how to spell. I appreciate you, Google. Alright, there is our gravitational constant. Alright, Earth mass. Again, this made a lot of sense to us. This variable name is a little bit more descriptive. I get that, but what unit is this in? Right? I believe it was in kilograms. So that would be a really good comment here. Measured in kilograms. Right? So notice that this text is gray for both of these things. This is just stuff that's ignored by the compiler. This has zero impact on the actual output of my code. It's only a note for me, the programmer, or any other programmers that happen to look at this. Our radius, right? This is a great variable name. We got this number here. That's fantastic. But what unit is this in? This is measured in meters, I believe. Okay. I think these are really good examples of comments and a good explanation of why you would want these. Like, the variable names are pretty descriptive, but things like units of measure, really good comments. Okay. Here we have a formula. Right. One thing I like to, it's expressed in terms of code, but maybe a good comment is me expressing this formula in a way that we're used to seeing. Something like g times mass divided by, and right, we did this multiplication. Really what it was going to be like radius squared. Just presenting the formula in a different way, maybe one that we're more accustomed to, as opposed to the one that is written out in code. Okay, a couple more. I commented these up here. It makes sense to comment these down here to be kind of consistent there, right? This is measured in kilograms. I'm actually just going to copy and paste this. And this is measured in meters. Okay. So this is a single line comment. And here I'm using it in a manner that we would call end of line, right? I have the code, and then at the end of the line is where the comment appears. You can use it in a different manner that most people are still kind of used to, right? So down here, this is my scanner stuff, right? We are creating a scanner object. That's a pretty good single line comment. Constructing a scanner object. We are prompting the user. I'm using tab, by the way, to get these all aligned. Prompting the user for input. And lastly, we are capturing the user's input and storing in a variable. Here I'm still using it as an end of line comment, but one way that you can use comments is to kind of comment a block of code. What do I mean? These 3 lines are like all related, right? These are all steps to scanner. And I have used kind of new lines to section them off, right? These 3 lines, they're adjacent, they're all right next to each other, indicating that they are related. Well, one thing I can do is come in here with a comment above that pertains to like this section of code or this block of code. So maybe I create a comment and we say something like use scanner to get user input. I'm putting this above, and what it pertains to is the next 3 lines that are all associated with each other. So this is another way that you can use a single line comment, but I would not call this an end of line comment, right? Just a single line comment. Maybe like these 2 system.out.print lines, they're related, right? Welcome the user to the program and explain the functionality or the function. Explain its function. Okay, so they're all considered single line comments. I would also perhaps call these end of line comments when they're used in this manner, but you can use them above a section of code to pertain to the following lines. And again, our spacing, right, these new lines help us keep our code sectioned off so that it makes kind of logical sense. So that's a single line comment. Right? Additionally, there's a multi-line comment. And our syntax for that is we're going to have a /*, the actual comment, and because this can span over multiple lines, we're going to have a closing syntax, this */. So for example, here's one that says converts a Fahrenheit temperature to Celsius. What I'd like you to notice is it actually spans over multiple lines, hence the name, multi-line comment. As the name suggests, multi-line comments can stretch over several lines. Everything that's between the opening syntax and the closing syntax will be considered part of the comment and ignored by the compiler. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. In practice, I don't use multi-line comments a ton, and a lot of people don't use multi-line comments. I don't see them that often. One of the best uses, I think, is actually just at the very beginning of your program. Here I'm going to start a multi-line comment. Right, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and IntelliJ has already automatically entered the closing syntax. Everything that appears in between that syntax, either on the same row or not, is considered part of the comment and ignored by the compiler. I'm doing it up top here because I think one of the best uses for multi-line comments is to do like this stuff up top identifying, who the author is, right? Maybe I would say something like author and then put my name. And I'm not going to display my name all to YouTube, but author is Bob Jones, and maybe your class period, right? And then 7th period. or the date is a good one. Maybe that's even more important than period. And today's in particular is 8. Numlock was not on. Our date in particular is 8/30/20. And maybe lastly there's like a description down here. This program converts the user's earth weight to moon weight. Uses scanner to get input from the user. Something like this, right? Notice all this text is kind of a darker gray. That's IntelliJ saying it's not necessarily relevant. It's commented text, right? The compiler doesn't care anything about this. I can write whatever I want to here. But I think this is a pretty good use of a multi-line comment to put some stuff at the top, identifying, information. Maybe if we were doing something silly like version numbers, you could like track a version number there. I don't know. You should always use comments to document your code and increase readability. I promise you, what I've heard from people in industry, their number one complaint is they get programmers that are good, but they just refuse to document things. They refuse to comment their code and that sort of thing. So for my class, I require comments. So I'm going to ask that you put comments in code. My rule of thumb is like 5. Find the 5 hardest things, the most difficult things about your program, and comment those. Okay, and as far as this identifying information up top, I would count that as just one comment. Right? I think if I had to identify the best comments in this entire program, I like this one. I like these where we do the units. So this is another 2, 3. I like this one where we re-explain the function or the equation. And so that's 4. And then, this stuff with scanner, it's going to be really fresh and new to us. So right now these comments are good, but over time, they're going to kind of lose some value. So then if I identify the 5th best one, I would say maybe this one, the gravitational constant one. It is possible to have too many comments, as constant upkeep will outweigh the benefit of the comments. What do I mean by this? So if I come in here and I write a comment for a section of code, and then I edit the code, and so then I got to edit the comment, right? Like constant upkeep of comments as you're changing code can be problematic. You don't want to spend more time trying to keep your comments up to date than you are actually coding. So I would argue it is possible to have too many comments. I don't want to comment every single thing. For one thing, that starts putting a lot more text on your screen, but then you have that constant upkeep as well. So my rule of thumb is at least 5, but just don't go ridiculous with it. Ultimately, you want to use your best judgment. If it takes a moment to understand a segment of code, then, as you're coding, if something is difficult and you got to come up with a tricky solution, it's worth commenting. It's going to be way harder down the road. Okay, so that's comments. Again, my rule of thumb is 5. In Java, we have string. String is an object that is used to store text, a string of characters. So we had learned in the past, in one of our videos, that there's 8 primitive data types. And if you come across a data type and it's not one of those 8, right? Int, double, boolean, char are the 4 I'm asking you know. But there's also float, long, byte, and short. Right? If you come across a data type and it's not one of those 8, that means it's an object. So you're going to see the string data type. It's not one of those 8. That means you can infer that it's an object. Another way that you can tell, typically, now it's not syntax, it's convention, meaning that the code doesn't demand this. It's just what programmers typically do. But if you come across the data type and it's capital, that's also an indicator that it's an object. Okay, so string is going to be a data type, an object data type. A string variable can be declared just like any other variable, right? In order to declare a variable, we need a data type and a variable name. So if I'm making a string variable, I'm going to have a data type of string and a variable name of whatever we want, right? In this case, it's called my greetings. Then we can use the assignment operator to assign it a value, but it's a string. It's not an integer, so I'm not giving it like a value of 7. It's not a double. I'm not giving it a value like 3.14. Instead, I'm giving it text. Right here, I'm using quotes in order to say what I want to store in this string variable. So on the right-hand side, we actually have a string that's in double quotes. String is just simply text. It's a string of characters. And I'm saving that using the assignment operator into my variable, which I'm declaring on the left-hand side. Text enclosed with double quotes is known as a string literal. Okay. The opposite of literal in this context is variable, right? I'm saving a string literal into a string variable. Strings can be combined with other variables, string literals, number literals, etc. A number literal is like a number value, like literally 7 is a number literal, as opposed to, again, a number variable, something like int. And we can add these things together using this little addition operator. We've actually probably done this before, right? We actually did it in Moonweight. I talked about annotating the output. Here I'm going from a string literal to a double, right? And what I'm doing is I'm piecing this together to make one larger string, my eventual output. I'm saying let's take this string literal and tack on to the end of it our weight, which is a double, right? And then we'll tack on to the end of that this string literal, and then we'll tack on this string literal, and then we will tack on this double, right? So we can use that addition operator to kind of piece together a longer and longer string and alternate between things like text, string literals, and number literals. Here's some examples of that, right? I have the string literal here, and I'm adding on to the end of it 16, which is a number literal. Here I have a string literal, and I'm adding onto it age, which is in theory some type of number variable, like maybe an integer. This process of adding strings together is known as concatenation. Fancy word. I've not heard it any other place other than computer science. But we are concatenating here. What we're doing is we are concatenating this string with this variable. That's going to kind of create a new string, which I'm then concatenating with a string literal. And we're piecing it together as we go, concatenating it. So we talk about string because, as it turns out, scanner can be used to get strings from the user, text from the user. We have seen how we can use scanner to get doubles. In our slides, it's talked about how we can use scanner to get an integer from the user. Well, there's two different methods, two different commands, if you will, in order to get strings from the user, essentially text input. Here we see some scanner code, right? We've done this first line before. We're creating a new scanner object that can read from the keyboard. I'm then prompting the user, but instead of prompting them for like a double, some type of numeric value, I'm going to get a string from them. We just learned that we can make a string variable. Okay, we've also learned that variables are super awesome when it comes to getting user input because it allows us to save that input and then refer to it in our program. So I'm creating a string variable here called name, and then we're using our scanner object, right? Here we see the inputs, and I'm using next line, which is going to capture the next string, basically the next line that the user enters, and we can save that into our variable. So with that in mind, we're going to code HelloYou. It's a take on Hello World, but in this case, the user is going to enter their name. So I'm going to tab over to my, no, we're struggling. I'm back in IntelliJ. I'm going to make a new project. I invite you to code along with me. We're going to go to File, New Project. We have our JDK already selected, so I'm going to go Next. I'm going to go Next, and I need to switch folders, so I'm going to hit these ellipses. You may already be in the correct folder, so you can just go ahead and name your project. But what we're going to name it is HelloYou. And I'm going to make sure that I have a subfolder created. Okay. When I hit finish, it's going to tell me that we're going to create that folder, and that's perfectly fine. And doing it in this window is also perfectly fine. So I'm going to expand my project folder, right-click on the SRC, make a new Java class. And I'm going to call this one HelloYou as well. Okay. So inside of this, I'm going to add in a main method. The way we do that is public static void main parentheses, and inside of that string with a capital S brackets args. This is our main method header. Maybe that's a good comment. And I'm going to use some braces to indicate a body, right? We have a head and we're going to have a body. Okay, I want to implement scanner. There's 4 steps in implementing scanner. This might be a good spot to pause the video if you want to attempt it on your own. Our very first step is to import. That goes even above the class header. I'm going to import java.util.scanner with a capital S. This is gray right away, which kind of makes it look like a comment, but basically IntelliJ is saying this is unused code. I've imported scanner, but I haven't made one. That's my second step. I'm going to declare a scanner. We have a data type of scanner. I'm going to have a variable name. I like input. And that's going to be a new scanner that reads from system.end. Our third step, while technically not required, is to prompt the user. I would say something like system.out.println. What is your name? Or please enter your name. I like that a little bit better. Please enter your name. Maybe not yell at them. Okay, this is our third step, prompting the user. Maybe as we're learning scanner, we want to have these comments. And our fourth and final step is to actually capture that input from the user and save it into a variable. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different. Everything has been the same. We've done this stuff with scanner, right? Step 1, import the scanner. Step 2, construct a scanner object. Step 3, prompt the user for input. I'm ready to capture that input. But what I want you to think about is, what is the data type? What are we getting from the user? In this case, we're asking for their name. It's not a number. It's going to be text. It's going to be a string. So I'm going to create a string variable called name. This is a data type, like int or double. This is a data type. Here is my variable, which I'm just calling name. So I have declared a string variable called name. We're able to store a string that is text into this variable. What I want to store is going to be their input. I'm going to take my scanner and ask it to get the next line. Okay, I will at a later date kind of talk about next versus next line and what the difference is here, but we're going to then take their input and then kind of make a custom message using an SOP. I want to say hello instead of hello world. We're going to say hello to whatever name they put in. And why don't we add some excitement by tacking that on. Let's try this out. I'm going to right click in free space and tell it to run. My program's going to execute. The first thing that we're really going to see is it should ask us for our name down here in the console. Please enter your name. It's me, Bob Jones. Hello, Bob Jones. Right here we concatenated a string. We took a string literal, tacked on a string variable, and then we tacked on another string literal. This is called concatenation, where we're piecing together the string, adding them together. Okay, maybe just add a little bit more complexity to our program. We prompt them for one more thing. System.out.println. What is your age? Age is something I would maybe measure as an integer, so I'm going to use an int instead here. So we create int age, and that's going to be equal to input same scanner dot next int. Okay, one thing I'd like you to notice, which is something we haven't really done before, is I am using my same scanner object input in order to get this next bit of data, their age. I didn't have to do this step 3 or step 2 all over again. My scanner gets created here and it still exists by the time I get down here. In fact, this scanner will continue to exist until this closing brace. We'll talk about that a little bit later, something called scope. But I am using that exact same scanner, so I didn't have to do step 2 all over again. Right? I was able to just reuse that object because it still exists, and I'm capturing an integer in this case, so I'm using next int, saving that into this variable. It's gray because I get it, but I don't really do anything with it. Why don't we do a system.out.println, and we include their age. Wow, that's old. Okay, I'm going to run my program, and because we've already, this is a subsequent time, I get to just hit this play button, and it's going to do it from start to finish again. All right, please enter your name. It's still me, Bob Jones. Hello, Bob Jones. What is your age? I am 23. 23? Wow, that's old. Okay, so what I really want to show you here is introducing this string variable so that we can actually use that to get text from the user, which is really cool. But we can reuse this scanner variable, and we can kind of mix and match our data types, right? Just as we are getting the data, I'm just reusing input, but depending on if I'm getting a string, I would use something like next line. If I'm getting an integer, I would use something like int. But that's been strings, that's been comments, and that's been HelloYou. I'll see you in the next one.